The ship is already on fire when you see it. Not catching fire, not about to burn, it's fully engulfed. Flames running the length of the sails, climbing the mast, curling through the rigging, like they've been burning for quite a while. Maybe too long. Long enough that by any normal measure there shouldn't be anything left. And yet, it's still sailing. Close to shore. Too close. Close enough that you don't question what you're seeing at first. You question why no one else is reacting. The Northumberland Strait stretches out ahead of you, calm, almost flat. It's been a good day. Warm sand, quiet water, nothing unusual, until now. Because that ship, it didn't sail in from the horizon. It didn't appear slowly growing out of the distance the way ships do. It's just there. White sails, what's left of them, glowing through the fire, the hull steady, cutting through the water like nothing's wrong. No panic, no signal, no smoke trailing off the way it should. Just fire that clings to it like it belongs, it's a part of it. You try to track it to make sense of distance, direction, anything, and then it's gone. No turning, no sinking, no fading into the horizon, just gone. Like it was never there at all. If that happened to you, you wouldn't be alone. For more than 200 years, people along the shores of the Northumberland Strait have described the same impossible sight. A schooner, 3 masts, sometimes 4. It sails bright and clean one moment and then completely overtaken by flame. And it always burns, but not the way fire should. The flames don't consume the ship, they don't bring it down, they don't leave wreckage behind, they move, they flicker, they look real, but they never seem to finish what they started. The ship just keeps going. Most sightings tend to cluster in the autumn, right before the northeast wind rolls in, when the weather starts to shift and the water takes on that restless edge. People notice that early on. Some still watch for it. But it doesn't hold. The ship has been seen in spring, in the middle of summer, even in winter when the air cuts sharp and the sea feels empty. Clear skies, heavy cloud, it doesn't seem to matter. Whatever pattern might exist slips the moment you try to rely on it. And sometimes it gets a little closer. There are accounts of the ship entering Charlottetown Harbour. Not distant, not half-hidden, but fully visible, right there among working boats and dockhands going about their day. One story stands out. About 100 years ago, a group of men on the docks spotted a schooner burning in the harbour, close enough to see movement on the deck, close enough to believe there were people on board fighting to save the ship. They didn't hesitate. A small boat was launched, oars in the water, heading straight toward it. Whatever they thought they were seeing, it was real enough to risk the crossing. They got close. Close enough that a rescue felt possible. And then the mist rolled in, fast, thick, swallowing the ship whole. By the time it cleared, there was nothing left to reach. No ship, no fire, no crew in the water. Just the harbor again. That kind of story is harder to brush aside. One person might misread the distance. A group acting on what they see? That's something else. And the sightings don't stop there. Years later, a group of teenagers driving near Victoria Harbour spotted the same ship, same structure, same fire. They watched long enough to notice something unsettling. The flames never consumed it. They moved, they climbed, but the ship stayed intact, as if the burning wasn't the end of this story, just a part of it. In the early 1960s, a crowded beach became the next witness. Late afternoon, dozens of people looking out across the water at the same time and seeing the same thing. A burning schooner that refused to disappear the way it should. And still, no single explanation ever really settles in. Some say it's a pirate vessel lost and forced to relive its final moments. Others point to immigrant ships swallowed by storms or lumber schooners that vanished without a trace. Each version explains a piece. None of them explain the whole. And then there are the sounds. Low, distant booms rolling across the water. Cannon fire, some say. Others just call them sea guns. No visible source, no ship firing them, just echoes, arriving without warning and fading the same way. Sometimes they come with the ship. That's when the water feels different, because whatever this is, a memory, illusion, something else entirely. It doesn't behave like something that ended a long time ago. It behaves like something still happening, out there, just beyond the shoreline, waiting to be seen again. By the time people started comparing stories, the shape of the thing was already clear. Not perfectly clear, but consistent in the ways that matter. A schooner, usually 3 masts, sometimes 4. The sails always stand out, bright, almost unnaturally white, catching whatever light is available, long enough to study, long enough that witnesses feel certain of what they're looking at. And then the fire, or maybe it was already there. That part shifts depending on who you ask. Sometimes it begins as they're watching, sometimes it's already burning. Some describe the flames as starting along the rigging, climbing upward like a real blaze would. Others say the ship is already engulfed when it appears, as if you're seeing it mid-disaster. Either way, the result is the same. The entire vessel becomes wrapped in fire. But it doesn't break apart. It doesn't collapse in on itself. The masts don't give way. The sails don't disintegrate. The flames move. They look alive. But they never seem to win, which is wrong, in a way that's hard to shake once you notice it. There are other details too. People talk about figures on deck, crew members moving through the chaos, climbing the rigging, working lines, sometimes even appearing to fight the fire itself. Not clearly enough to recognize faces or features, but clearly enough that no one mistakes them for shadows. It feels like a moment frozen in motion, or maybe repeated? There's an expectation that comes with sightings like these, a sense that if enough people describe the same thing, there must be a pattern underneath it, a cause, a trigger. For a while, people thought that they had one. The ship was said to appear before a northeast wind, a kind of a warning. See the ship and you know what's coming next. Rough weather, a storm rolling in from the wrong direction, the sea turning hostile. And sometimes that held true, but not always true. The ship shows up when it shouldn't. Calm days, quiet water, no storm on the horizon. Other times the wind comes and there's no ship at all. Whatever connection people thought they saw, it slips when you try to rely on it. That's been the frustrating part over the years. There's just enough consistency to make the story feel grounded. Enough agreement between witnesses that it doesn't fall apart under scrutiny. And then, right when it starts to feel predictable, it does something else. Something that doesn't fit. The story from Charlottetown Harbour, where rescuers rowed out and found nothing, sits right alongside quieter sightings. A glimpse from shore, a distant shape that burns for a few minutes before vanishing. And then there are the moments where people stay long enough to really watch it. That's when the details get uncomfortable, because the fire never behaves like it's ending. It doesn't spread to its completion. It doesn't leave behind any wreckage. It doesn't sink the ship in any kind of way, even when witnesses say it looks like it's going under. The disappearance is too clean, too complete. One moment it's there, the next it is not. No transition, no aftermath, just gone. Over time, the legend stretched across the entire strait, from the southern shores of Prince Edward Island to the coasts of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. The same ship, or something close enough to be called the same, appearing in different places under different conditions, seen by individuals, seen by groups, sometimes doubted, sometimes not. In 1900, the harbor incident left behind more than just a story. It left behind a problem. Too many people involved, too direct an interaction, too hard to dismiss as imagination when men physically set out to meet it. 50 years later, teenagers in that car spot the ship again near Victoria Harbour. It's a different generation, the same description. They watch the crew moving, climbing, working through the blaze. They watch long enough to realize something no one wants to say out loud at first. The fire is not consuming. And then in the early 1960s, a crowded beach becomes the next witness. Not one person, not two. It's a gathering of people, all looking out at the same thing. At some point, the question changes. It stops being, did someone really see this? And becomes, why does it keep appearing like this? Because whatever the origin, pirates, lost immigrants, vanished lumber ships, those explanations behave like an ending, singular events, one tragedy, one loss, one final moment. This doesn't feel like a single moment. It feels ongoing, like something caught in a loop, maybe, or something replaying under conditions that no one can really understand. And then there's the detail people tend to mention almost in passing, the sound. The low, distant booms rolling across the water. They're not constant, not tied neatly to every sighting, but present often enough that it becomes part of this story. Cannon fire, different guns, no visible source, no ship on the horizon firing them, just sound carrying across open water, arriving without context and fading the same way. It doesn't explain the ship. If anything, it makes the whole thing feel even larger. Like the burning schooner isn't the only piece of whatever this is. Just the part that people can see. At some point, the stories stopped being enough on their own. Not because they faded, because they didn't. Too many sightings, too consistent in the details, stretching across generations. Eventually, someone tries to pin that down, to take something that feels impossible and press it into a shape that makes sense. One of the earliest attempts came in 1905. A scientist from New Brunswick, William Francis Ganong, looked at the reports and saw something familiar in them. Not a burning ship, not a trapped crew, but a natural effect being misread in the moment. He pointed to something called St. Elmo's fire. It's a real phenomenon, electrical in nature. Under the right atmospheric conditions, a kind of glowing discharge can form around pointed objects, ship masts, for example. It can flicker, dance, even look like flame if you don't know what you are seeing. Out on open water, with shifting light and distance playing tricks on the eye, it's not hard to imagine how that could be mistaken for a fire climbing through rigging. Ganong believed that was one of the root of it. Not a phantom ship, but an effect misinterpreted, then retold, then shaped by expectation over time. And it almost works. Almost. Because the descriptions don't stop at light. They include structure, masts, sails, movement across the water, people, crew, seen climbing, working, and reacting, details that go beyond a glow or a flicker. So other explanations followed. Some lean toward the environment again. Fog, for instance. The Northumberland Strait is no stranger to it. Banks of mist can roll in fast, thick enough to distort distance and shape. Under the right conditions, light from the moon, or even from distant sources, can reflect and stretch across that fog. A shape appears where there shouldn't be one, something solid or something that looks solid. From far enough away, with the right angle, the human mind does the rest. It fills in the gaps, turns suggestion into certainty, a ship instead of a shadow, flames instead of reflected light. It's a compelling idea, and like the others, it explains a piece of the puzzle, but not all of it. Because there are still those moments that resist simplification. The sightings where the ship is close, too close for vague shapes and distant light to carry the whole explanation. The accounts where multiple people describe the same details, not just the same impression. And then there's something else. Something found, not imagined. In 2015, the Canadian Hydrographic Service identified a shipwreck in Pictou Harbour, a wooden vessel, resting upright beneath the water, around 60 meters in length, large enough to have been a significant presence in its time. What stood out wasn't just its size, it was the condition of the ship. The structure remained mostly intact, but there were signs of fire damage, clear enough to be noted, clear enough to suggest that whatever happened to this ship, fire was a part of it. It's tempting to draw a line from that wreck to the stories. A real ship, a real fire. Lost, perhaps, under circumstances that never fully made it into record. Over time, that memory shifts, grows, takes on new life in retelling, and eventually it becomes something else, something seen. But even that doesn't settle things, because the timeline doesn't quite line up cleanly. The sightings reach back at least 200 years, maybe more. The wreck is one piece from one moment. It doesn't account for the way the ship continues to appear, decade after decade, under different skies and different seasons. It's still burning, it's still intact, still gone the moment you try to reach it. So the explanation sits where they've always been. Natural phenomenon, optical illusions, misinterpretations layered over time. And maybe something tied to a real event buried beneath all of it. None of them fully collapse under scrutiny, none of them fully hold either, and that's where the story stays. Out on the water between Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Northumberland Strait, keeps its distance. Calm some days, restless on others, and every so often, without warning, without a clear pattern, it returns. White sails catching the light, fire moving where it shouldn't, a crew that never quite escapes what's happening around them, seen long enough to be believed, gone too quickly to be understood. If you ever find yourself standing along the shores of Northumberland Strait, maybe at the end of a long, quiet day, it's worth taking one last look out over the water, just in case you might see something. If you enjoyed this video, comment, like, subscribe, and stick around for our next venture into the Foggy Vales.